Of all the bike stuff I've tried, this has actually gotten me the most questions. And that's actually one of the things I really like about it, is how curious people are about it. And that is this SR Suntour suspension. I've been riding this for the last, 1 or 2 months now, and yeah, let's talk about it. Okay, let's start with the rear coil, because I think that one's gonna be really short and, pretty straightforward. It feels like pretty much every other coil that I've tried. The only thing I can say against it compared to a shock, say like the DHX2, is that the DHX2 can let you tune high-speed rebound and high-speed compression. So if you really want to get in there and get all nitpicky about the way your suspension feels, I think that coil is very nice for that. But one thing that this shock does that the other shocks don't do is that you can actually tune the IFP pressure just with a hand pump, like you would pump up a fork like this. I actually don't know what the IFP pressure does exactly to the whole kinematics of the coil. All I can tell you is that it definitely does feel different. It kind of affects the spring rate and affects the bottom out. And yeah, that's been really nice just to play around with. And I wish more shocks had that option. So this shock only has low speed compression and low speed rebound, but I'll give it some huge points in that the clicks actually do something. You actually can feel a difference, and I really like that. I've had shocks where you just click them and you're like, is that different? I don't know. I just play around with it. All the way closed, all the way open, feels the same. That's not true in this case. You can actually tune the shock quite a bit. I like that dynamic range there. But yeah, overall, the Suntour coil feels great. Feels like pretty much every other coil. And yeah, if you're thinking about grabbing one, I don't see why not. But okay, let's go to the front of the bike to this fork, because I think that's a lot more interesting. Now, this is the SR Suntour fork. This is the Duralux 38, and the 38 means it has 38 mil stanchions, just like the Box 38 and the RockShox Zeb. This is probably the best value fork that I've seen out there, because I think it currently retails at $1,100 Canadian, which at the time of when I'm looking at this, the Fox 38 is I think $500 or $600 more. And I don't know if that's $500 or $600 more better. This Suntour fork is quite nice. But first, let's talk about a few facts about it. Okay, the aesthetics. I actually quite like the aesthetics, especially this gray. I really have no problem with the graphics or anything like that. Yeah, really no complaints. I think a lot of people may be a bit off-put at first because it's different. If there's one thing that mountain bikers hate, one thing I've really learned is that anything that's different is immediately bad. And I don't blame them for that, the status quo is very good in mountain biking, but this is new and it's also quite good, so give it a chance. I like the way it looks. I think it looks premium and it also feels premium. And I actually prefer it over the black version. I like this gray. This fork is an air fork, so you pump it up on the left-hand side here. And it also has high and low speed compression, which is very nice. And then it's also got low speed rebound. So another thing I really love about this fork is it has these two little bleed ports at the back. If you've ever been riding your fork, you've been riding in the wet, you need to service it, really. And you don't want to do that. You just pop open these little bleed ports here, you inject a little bit of oil. Feels good as new, at least for a while. It does have a 203 mil direct mount, which was a bit odd for me because I wanted to run a 220 router, so I had to find, actually had to make a very odd shaped 17 mil extension to put my caliper on so I could fit this 220 router. So that's something to keep in mind. It's got a quick release axle, and it is unfortunately a few hundred grams heavier than the Fox 38 or Zeb. I do have it set up for 180 mil travel. I am 220 right now. I'm running about 81 PSI and no tokens. But okay, most importantly, how does this fork actually ride? Now this fork does feel different than a Zeb or 38. And I think at first, again, because something is different, your mind immediately jumps to going, oh, it's worse. But I think I just had to learn how to tune it because once I figured it out, right now, the way I've got it set up, it's tuned for me and it feels really great. Unfortunately, it's really hard to articulate how a fork feels and how a fork is going to feel on your bike and for you in your area. But all I can say is I've ridden a 38 and I've ridden a Zeb. And yeah, I think if they were set up exactly the same and you were doing like a really rompy section, you might be hard pressed to actually tell the difference between any of these forks. The difference is, it's kind of nuanced. Now I think you have to keep in mind that this fork is quite a bit cheaper than its competition because at the end of the day, it doesn't perform as well. After you've ridden it for a while, you can't tell that it's just a little less refined than its competition, but is it so much less refined that you're willing to spend an extra $500 or $600 on something like a 38 or Zeb? Yeah, I'm not so sure. I could switch out this fork, and I'm gonna switch it out to do more testing, but I could have swapped this fork out a long time ago. And I just never bothered because I was like, it feels fine. Right now I've got the fork set up to have a bit more mid-stroke support, and I think that's one of the things where that's the refinement that these other forks have done. You know, that's where that extra $500 are going. That slight amount of more mid-stroke support is what you're paying for. So right now, it's got good off-the-top sensitivity and then good mid-stroke support the way I've got it set up. And I would just say it's just slightly behind a fork like the Fox 38. Now, a place where it's as good or better is on bigger hits. There's definitely been times where I've been hitting, you know, bigger rompy sections, either going off drops or hitting like a bigger compression, where I've generally been like, wow, like my suspension feels great right now. This fork, the shock, I was like, that felt just nice. It was a nice experience to feel the suspension compress. And that's at least as good, if not better, of the experience that I've had on the Fox 38 DHX2 combo. Another thing I really like about this fork is that the clicks actually do something. The difference between fully closed and fully open on both the high and low speed compression are noticeable. On the Fox 38, I've left it all the way open and ridden for a while, and then I've closed it all the way, and I've been like, oh, can I tell the difference between this? Now, maybe I'm just not a good enough rider to tell sort of that amount of dynamic range with the Fox 38, but I can tell you that I can tell the difference with these clicks on this fork. Same goes for the rebound, of course, but I can't, you know, give Fox or RockShox a hard time about that because I think their rebound damping also, a few of those clicks actually does make a pretty significant difference. Okay, so if this fork is so great, you know, why isn't everyone riding it? Well, there are a few downsides. One, of course, I mentioned is the weight. It is a bit of a chonker, and you know, in my case, I don't really care. It's a very small percentage of my overall weight. But if you're a lighter rider and you're adding a pound to the bike, yeah, that might actually matter. This fork in its stock tune also is tuned very damped. So when I first got it, it had, you know, the standard, you know, damping circuit in it, and I was running all of the compression wide open and the rebound wide open, and it was still a little slower and a little stiffer than I would have liked. I had to run the air pressure much lower, which again ruined the mid-stroke support. So I was having issues with that. So I reached out to Suntour and they're like, oh, you know, let's just tune the damper a little lighter. They sent me a lighter tune, and now it's feeling great. This is the great fork that I have now. I just have a slightly lighter tune on it, and it's great. So that is one thing to keep in mind if you are going to purchase this fork, and especially if you are a lighter rider and you like a very supple feeling fork. I would just say to them, you know, in the comments of your order, be like, hey, you know, can I get the lighter tune? I just like, you know, I'm a lighter rider or something like that. Now, one of the less refined bits about this fork that I've been noticing is compared to other forks, there's a greater variation in fork performance in warm and cold weather. When it gets really cold, it slows down and stiffens up a lot more than other forks. I've experienced this with all forks. Like if you've ever ridden in a really warm area, or you had your bike in the car and then you've gone to, you know, Whistler Mountain Bike Park and gone up to the top where it's like 2 degrees Celsius above zero, you'd be like, oh, like the fork is feeling pretty stiff. You know, you got to open up everything, open up all the rebound compression. That does happen to every fork, but it happened more so to this fork. You know, if you're not riding in cold weather, you're usually riding in generally pretty warm weather. That's not going to be an issue. That being said, I actually haven't been able to try it with the lighter tuned damping circuit because it's been super hot here in BC for basically the whole time since I've had it. So I'd be curious to try what this lighter tune is like in the cold, wet weather. And so I think that's about it. It's a great fork. It's a great value. You know, it needs a little bit of refinement. It's only a little bit behind its competition, and had this fork come out a few years ago, it would have been amazing. But you know, the competition is way up here. And because of that, you know, we gotta be all nitpicky and go like, well, you know, this just isn't as good. And that's what I have to do with this fork. Let's put it this way. I've ridden the hardest features that I've ever ridden while riding the suspension, and I never noticed. I never felt like the suspension was holding me back. I haven't felt the need to take it off or anything like that. And so that's sort of the best endorsement I can give for it. And so yeah, that's it. That's the SR Suntour Duralux 38. Let me know if you have any questions. Leave them down in the comments. We can talk about it. I just got my Fox 38 put to 180 mil travel too, so I'm gonna put all that suspension back on because this has been feeling so great. I gotta try my standard setup again just to compare the two because, like I said, the differences are pretty nuanced. So I'm gonna put the Fox back on for a while and try it out just to see if I can actually tell the difference. So all in all, great fork, a lot of tunability, great price, a little chonky, and a little less reliable in varying weather conditions. Okay, hope you enjoyed the video. See you guys in the next one.